The scent of roasted chicken and rosemary drifted through the dining room, the kind of aroma that once promised warmth, togetherness, and safety. The chandelier above us cast a soft golden glow, bouncing off polished cutlery and half-filled wine glasses. But despite the picture-perfect scene, I couldn't shake the unease simmering in my chest. It was supposed to be an ordinary family dinner, a rare gathering where my son, Daniel, and his fiancée, Lila, joined us after weeks of excuses. I had spent the whole day preparing, choosing his favorite dishes: mashed potatoes, whipped smooth, buttery rolls, the apple pie recipe that used to make him sneak into the kitchen as a boy. Every gesture, every detail, was an attempt to remind him of the roots he once belonged to. We laughed politely at my husband's forced jokes. Knives scraped plates. The grandfather clock ticked in the background, each second heavier than the last. I noticed Daniel barely touched his food, his fork moving absently while his eyes stayed locked on Lila. She was beautiful. I couldn't deny that. Porcelain skin, a smile that could have lit the room if she'd chosen to share it. But tonight, she sat guarded, her hand resting firmly on Daniel's knee under the table like a claim. I cleared my throat, choosing my moment carefully. "So," I said, forcing a brightness I didn't feel, "when's the big day?" "The wedding. Have you two set a date yet?" The room stilled. It wasn't the pause itself that sent a chill down my spine. It was the way Daniel's shoulders stiffened, the way his fork clinked against the plate as though the question had startled him. He didn't answer. Instead, Lila leaned closer, her perfume, something sharp and expensive, filling my lungs. She tilted her head, her voice barely audible. "We got married yesterday." I froze. The words pierced through me like shards of glass. For a moment I thought I'd misheard, that the clamor of dishes had distorted her whisper. But no, Daniel's face confirmed it. He couldn't meet my eyes. My fork slipped from my hand, hitting the china with a clang that echoed too loud in the silence. My husband shifted in his chair, clearing his throat, but his gaze stayed fixed on his wineglass. "Yesterday?" I repeated, my voice thin, trembling, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes," she said again, louder this time, steady, almost daring me to challenge her. "We had a small ceremony, just close friends. Not family, not me." My heart pounded, a hollow drumbeat in my ears. I thought of all the nights I stayed up helping Daniel with homework, the years of saving to send him to college, the sacrifices made so he could have a future better than mine. And yet here I was, excluded, erased. Why? I choked on the word, forcing it out again. Why wasn't I told? Daniel finally looked up, his eyes darting between me and his wife. Shame flickered there, quickly smothered by something harder, something resigned. "It just happened fast," he murmured. "Fast?" Weddings didn't just happen. They were planned, celebrated, shared. My hands curled into fists under the table. I tried to swallow my humiliation, but memories pressed forward uninvited. The time he called me from college, broke and hungry, and I wired money I didn't have. The winter I sold my mother's jewelry to cover his rent. The countless times I told myself it was worth it, because someday he'd stand at an altar and I'd watch proudly as he built a family. And now, that moment had been stolen from me. Lila leaned back, sipping her wine as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb in my chest. My husband muttered something about young love and their decision, but the words floated past me, meaningless. The room grew unbearably tight. My appetite vanished. My chest ached with a hollowness that no food, no explanation could fill. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask how a mother becomes a stranger overnight. But the weight of their silence pressed me down, pinning me to my chair. Daniel's hand slipped under the table, squeezing hers. It was a small gesture, but it sliced through me deeper than her words. He had chosen her secrets, chosen her family. My lips trembled, but I forced them still. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me break. Instead, I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, the sound shrill in the tense air. "Excuse me?" I said, though my voice cracked. I moved toward the kitchen, each step echoing with betrayal. Behind me, I heard Daniel exhale, relieved I hadn't pressed further. That relief, his comfort at my silence cut deeper than the confession itself. I pressed my hand against the cool marble counter, struggling to steady my breath. Through the doorway, I could still see them, her hand clasped over his, their heads bent close together. As if I was already the outsider, the intruder. A whisper replayed in my mind, over and over, until it was all I could hear. We got married yesterday, and beneath the shock, beneath the grief, something darker stirred, a question that refused to let go. If they hid their wedding from me, what else were they hiding? The morning after that dinner, the house felt heavier than usual, as though the air itself knew something had shattered. I woke before sunrise, the sky outside a slate gray, rain tapping lightly against the kitchen window. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, growing cold, while I replayed the night in my head like a cruel film on loop. Her whisper. We got married yesterday. Daniel's downcast eyes. The silence that followed, thick enough to drown me. I kept asking myself, how could my own son strip me from one of the most sacred days of his life? I tried distracting myself with chores, folding laundry, wiping counters that were already clean. Yet every folded towel, every polished dish reminded me of years spent holding this family together, sacrifices no one else had seen. The memory of his engagement came flooding back. The day he proposed, he'd rushed over with Lila, their cheeks pink from excitement. I had hugged her, hugged them both. I'd even pulled out my wedding dress from storage, lifting the lace veil from its yellowed box, offering to have it restored for her. She'd smiled politely, too politely, like someone who already had other plans. Still, I had believed. Believed I'd watch him take vows under an arch of white roses. Believed I'd clasp his hand as he said, "I do." Believed stupidly that no matter what, a son wouldn't erase his mother. But belief is fragile. And that morning I found proof of its death. It happened while I was taking out the trash. The bag was heavy, nearly tearing, and as I shoved it into the bin, something pale caught my eye among coffee grounds and crumpled paper towels. A stiff corner of cardstock. Curiosity made me pull it free, ignoring the damp smears of garbage clinging to its edge. My heart stopped when I smoothed it open. An invitation, not just any card, their wedding invitation. Elegant calligraphy spelled their names, embossed in gold. The date was last week, not yesterday, as she'd whispered. And then my eyes locked on the detail that sliced deeper than any blade. Under family guests, our name had been printed, then scratched out with deliberate black ink. Someone had taken a pen and erased us from their lives. I staggered back, the invitation slipping from my fingers onto the tile. The room tilted, spinning. A mother doesn't just imagine betrayal. She feels it, a physical tearing inside her chest. "Are you all right?" My husband's voice came from the doorway. He stepped in, still in his robe, hair uncombed. I picked up the card with trembling hands. "Look at this," I whispered, my throat raw. They sent invitations. We were supposed to be there. He took it, squinted, then sighed. Maybe it was a mistake. A mistake? My voice cracked, rising. Our name was scratched out. On purpose. He set it on the counter as though it were nothing. Don't stir drama. They're married now. What's done is done. Anger flared hot, washing over the humiliation. Don't stir drama? They cut us out of their wedding, our own son. Maybe he thought you'd disapprove of how they wanted it, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. And since when does a mother get disinvited for having opinions? My voice shook with disbelief. He didn't answer, just lifted the newspaper and disappeared into the living room, leaving me alone with the trash-stained card burning in my hand. I sat down at the table, staring at it. Every flourish of gold ink mocked me. I remembered maxing out credit cards to pay for his braces, working double shifts when he was in high school so he could join that expensive soccer league. I remembered the nights I went hungry just so he could eat. Every sacrifice now looked like a cruel joke. Tears blurred the words, smearing the black ink where our name had been crossed out. The symbolism was too sharp. We had been erased, like garbage thrown away with coffee grounds and scraps. I wanted to burn it, to rid myself of the evidence. But something inside whispered, "Keep it. You'll need proof." Proof of what? I didn't know yet. But deep down, I sensed this was just the beginning. Later that evening, when the rain had stopped, I pulled the invitation from my purse and studied the fine print. That's when I noticed something I had overlooked in my shock. The venue. It wasn't a church I knew, not even one in our neighborhood. Instead, it was a name that sent a chill crawling up my spine. The Langmore Estate, a sprawling mansion on the edge of town, notorious for its exclusivity. A place where the wealthy hosted galas, charity auctions, and weddings meant to flaunt power rather than celebrate love. Daniel had never mentioned it. Neither had Lila. Why there? Who arranged it? I pressed the card flat against the table, staring at those ornate letters as dread pooled in my stomach. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a rushed ceremony, as they claimed. It was deliberate. Planned, hidden, and if they could lie about something as monumental as a wedding, what else were they hiding from me? The chandelier above flickered, throwing shadows across the kitchen walls. I shivered, clutching the invitation tighter. I suddenly felt like an intruder in my own son's story, a story he was writing without me, erasing me line by line. But one thing I knew with certainty, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot, because if Daniel thought he could bury his wedding from me, he was wrong. I now had a shovel. And the first thing I had unearthed was this invitation, scratched out, buried in trash, but screaming the truth louder than words. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately shut me out, and I was going to find out why. The morning after I found the invitation, the house seemed to hum with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that buzzed like static, crawling under your skin. Outside, the world looked deceptively calm. Pale winter sunlight filtering through thin clouds, the faint chirp of birds pecking at the frost. Inside, though, my chest was heavy, my hands restless. The invitation sat on the table where I had left it, its edges warped from damp trash, the calligraphy still mocking me. The Langmore Estate. I whispered the name like a curse. It felt foreign, gilded, and untouchable. I couldn't stop staring at the scratched-out family line. My name, erased. If the wedding was at such an extravagant venue, there would be evidence, photos, proof I hadn't just imagined the betrayal. I couldn't rely on Daniel to tell me the truth. He had made it clear where his loyalties lay. So I picked up my phone and dialed the number I found on the estate's website. "Langmore Estate, this is Claire speaking," came a polished voice. I swallowed hard. "Hello, I was hoping to inquire about an event that took place recently. A wedding. My voice cracked, but I forced the words, the Whitaker-Langmore wedding. A pause. The kind of pause where someone decides whether you're worth answering. "Yes, that ceremony was held here last week," she said finally. My pulse raced. "Would you happen to know who the photographer was?" "I believe it was Anderson & Co. Photography. They do all our high-end events." I thanked her quickly, scribbling down the name before my voice could betray me further. Contacting the photographer felt like trespassing into a life that was mine, but no longer mine. I rehearsed the call 3 times before finally pressing dial. A man answered, cheerful and professional. "Anderson & Co., and this is Greg." "Hello," I said, steadying my tone. I'm looking for photos from the Whitaker-Langmore wedding. I'm a relative and wasn't able to attend. Of course. We've just finished editing those. They're stunning. Do you have an email I can send the proof gallery to?" My hand shook as I gave him my address. Minutes later, the notification pinged. My finger hovered over the link like it might explode. Then I clicked. The screen bloomed with images so vivid it felt like stepping into the day I had been denied. Daniel in a tailored tuxedo, sharper and more grown than I'd ever seen him. Lila, radiant in a silk gown that clung like liquid moonlight, her veil catching the sunlight. Her parents, glowing with pride, each arm linked with the couple. Laughter, champagne, golden light spilling through chandeliers, but nowhere when that was I. It was as if I'd never existed. As if the years of sacrifices, the lullabies, the scraped knees, the graduation caps, had all belonged to someone else's story. I leaned closer to the screen, tears blurring the images. My son's smile cut deepest of all. He wasn't just happy, he was free. Free from me. My mind dragged me backward, unwillingly, to the memory of his first school play. He had been so nervous, clutching my hand before stepping on stage. "You'll be right there, right, Mom?" he'd asked. And I had smiled and promised, always. Now I realized how easily that word had been broken. I scrolled further, my chest tightening with each photo. The first dance, toasts, a kiss beneath fairy lights. The Langmore family circle, closing tightly around Daniel. He looked absorbed, folded into their world seamlessly, a piece of their puzzle, not ours, not mine. I whispered to the empty room. They replaced me. And then I froze. In one frame, amidst the swirl of guests, stood a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't family, not with that deliberate distance in her posture. Not a casual friend either, judging by how the camera seemed to find her again and again. She had striking features, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that watched everything. And in one photo, she stood dangerously close to my son. His arm brushed hers as he leaned in, laughing, his bride nowhere in sight. I zoomed in, my heart thudding. Who was she? Why was she so close? I scrolled frantically through the gallery. Again, there she was, caught in the background, near him, never far. In another shot, her hand lingered on his shoulder as he bent to whisper something. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a guest. I leaned back, clutching the laptop as though it might steady me. Betrayal had already hollowed me out once, but this felt like a blade twisting deeper. What had Lila's whisper really meant? We got married yesterday. She hadn't mentioned who else had been there, or what else unfolded. The betrayal wasn't only secrecy. It was replacement. I was shaking, unable to look away. Every mother imagines being pushed aside by a spouse, but another woman? So soon, so brazenly? The photos burned into my mind, each one carving out another piece of me. My son, smiling. Not at me, not for me, but in someone else's orbit. A stranger's. My stomach churned, bile rising. I closed the laptop, pressing the lid down as though shutting it might erase what I'd seen. But the images wouldn't leave me. That woman's face haunted me, her shadow already stretching across my family. For years, I had been the keeper of Daniel's memories, the one who saved every school photo, every drawing, every birthday candle stub. Now the only photos that mattered, the photos of his vows, painted a world I wasn't allowed into. And worse, a world where someone else stood at his side. The storm inside me refused to calm. My thoughts tangled into one burning question: who was she? And what did she mean to my son? The first hint didn't come from my son, or even from Lila. It came from across the hedge. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind where the sky was too clear, too blue, too cheerful for the weight pressing on my chest. I was watering the petunias, though my hands moved mechanically, not really seeing the flowers. My mind was still tangled in the images from the photographer's gallery. Daniel's smile, the glowing lights, and that woman standing too close. The sound of a gate creaking open jolted me. Mrs. Grant, my neighbor of nearly 20 years, waved cheerfully as she shuffled toward her mailbox. Her perfume carried across the breeze, lavender and powder, familiar, comforting. Congratulations, she called out with a smile. I blinked. The hose slipped from my hand, spraying water onto my shoes. Excuse me? She laughed lightly. On Daniel's wedding, of course. Such a sweet, intimate thing. I was so happy for you when I heard. Her words sliced clean through me. Intimate. Sweet. Happy for me. I forced a tight smile, my throat constricting. Yes, it was something, I murmured, though my voice sounded brittle. Mrs. Grant leaned on her fence, lowering her voice as if sharing gossip. They said only close family came. Makes sense, you know, these days with costs and all. A private little affair. The air rushed out of my lungs. Only close family. The phrase echoed inside me, sour and jagged. Who counted as close family if not the mother who raised him? Who had earned that place if not me? I nodded numbly, pretending agreement, but every fiber of me screamed. She kept talking, unaware she was stabbing me with every casual word. I saw a few photos online. Oh, what a beautiful venue. And Lila's father looked so proud, didn't he? Walking her in, showing off the new son-in-law. Her words blurred. I felt the blood drain from my face. My son, paraded like a prize, while I, the woman who scraped and bled for him, was erased. I mumbled an excuse. retreating quickly inside, closing the door before the tremor in my hands betrayed me. I sank onto the couch, clutching a cushion against my chest as if it could hold me together. My mind spun with the phrase, close family. I remembered Daniel's childhood birthday parties. The balloons I blew up until my lips ached, the cakes I baked by candlelight after late shifts. I had been his entire circle once. I had been his close family, and now, replaced, pushed out. The humiliation grew unbearable, twisting into rage. I needed answers. That afternoon, I searched for Lila's social media, the one she kept private, the one Daniel had once brushed off as just for friends. To my surprise, her profile wasn't locked down as tightly as before. A few tagged posts slipped through the cracks. Scrolling, I found it. A photo of Daniel and Lila standing in front of a white house with black shutters. A new house. Their smiles were wide, her hand resting proudly on his chest. The caption, written by one of her friends, read, "Housewarming for the newlyweds," courtesy of Daddy Langmore. Nothing but the best. My vision tunneled. Courtesy of Daddy Langmore. So that was it. Not only had they cut me out of the wedding, but now they were living in a house bought by her father. My son's independence, his pride, all handed over to another man's wallet. I whispered to the empty room, "That's not how I raised you." That evening, I confronted my husband. He sat in his recliner, glasses perched on his nose, pretending to read. "Did you know?" I asked, standing in the doorway with the phone in my hand, the photo glaring from the screen. He looked up, blinking. "Know what?" "That they moved. That they're in a house, his house, paid for by her father." His eyes flicked to the phone, then away. He sighed heavily. "Yes, Daniel mentioned it. I didn't think it mattered." "Didn't matter?" My voice cracked, rising. "We weren't even invited to their wedding. And now they're bought, owned, living under another man's roof." "Calm down," he muttered, turning back to his paper. But I couldn't calm down. The betrayal roared too loudly. "Do you realize what this means? He's theirs now, not ours. They erased us, and you think it doesn't matter?" My husband folded the paper with a snap. His face was weary, lines deepened by years of resignation. "He's an adult. He makes his choices. We can't control him." I stared at him, disbelief flooding me. "This isn't just about choices. This is about loyalty, blood. He's choosing them over us." He looked away, unwilling to fight. But his silence was an answer in itself. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The shadows stretched long, clawing across the room. Every tick of the clock felt like another second I had lost my son further. In my mind, I saw the scratched-out invitation, the photos with the mysterious woman, the neighbor's whisper, and now, this house, the final insult. I had worked my whole life to give Daniel a foundation. And now he stood on one, built by another man's money, another family's approval. Something inside me hardened. If they thought they could erase me, they were wrong. If they thought they could replace me, they underestimated the woman who had raised him through storms and hunger and loneliness. But for now, I said nothing. I let the fury coil deep inside, waiting, because one day soon, I would walk through the doors of that house, and I would see for myself what kind of life they thought was worth abandoning me for. The house was silent, the kind of silence that makes every creak sound like a confession. The clock on the wall glowed 2:07 a.m. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, sleep nowhere near me. My mind replayed Mrs. Grant's words, the wedding photos, the new house bought with her father's money. Each memory was a splinter, burrowing deeper under my skin. Finally, I gave up trying to rest. I slipped from bed, careful not to wake my husband, and padded barefoot to the living room. The glow of my phone screen lit my face in the dark, harsh, and cold. My hands trembled as I opened Instagram, typing in Daniel's name. His profile was a curated gallery of smiles, polished and distant. But it wasn't his posts I was after. It was the tags. People who had been there, people who had shared the night I wasn't allowed to see. The first photo made my stomach knot. Lila's mother, beaming, her arm wrapped proudly around Daniel. Her caption, "So blessed to welcome our new son into the family." Couldn't have asked for more. I stared at those words until they blurred. Our new son. The phrase dug under my ribs like a knife. I had carried him inside me, endured the screams of labor, the long nights of fevers and homework and heartbreak. And now he was theirs. I scrolled on, each post a fresh wound. Lila's father toasting with champagne, declaring, "The best decision Daniel ever made was choosing our daughter." Friends of the family gushing about how perfect the couple looked, how strong the Langmores' support was, not a single mention of us. Not one photo with me, with his father, with anyone from our side. It was as though we had been erased from his history. A memory surged, unbidden, Daniel's graduation day. He had stood in his cap and gown, scanning the crowd until he found me. His smile then had been for me, his arms wrapping around me in pure joy. "We did it, Mom," he'd whispered, tears in his eyes. Back then, I had believed we were a team. But now, in every wedding photo, his smiles belonged to them. I couldn't stop myself. I clicked on the profile of a woman tagged in several shots. A bridesmaid, perhaps, judging by her dress. Her feed was open. She had posted a group photo of the reception, champagne glasses raised. My son was in the background, laughing, his face lit by candlelight. The caption read, "A night to remember with the best people. Shock family forever, family forever." And I wasn't part of it. My chest tightened, anger drowning out the sadness. I needed answers. My fingers hovered over the message button. For a long moment I hesitated, but desperation won. I typed, "Hi, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I'm Daniel's mother. I wasn't able to attend the wedding. Could you tell me how it was?" My finger hovered over send. I almost deleted it, pride clawing at me. But then I hit the button. The message hung there, a fragile lifeline in the void. Minutes dragged. I set the phone down, paced, picked it up again. At 2:34 a.m., the typing bubbles appeared. My breath caught. Her reply was polite at first, hesitant. "Oh, hello." It was beautiful, very intimate. Everyone seemed so happy. I swallowed the bitterness and asked, "Why didn't anyone from our family know? Why weren't we invited?" The typing bubble lingered longer this time. Finally, her words appeared. "I don't know what to say. Daniel just told us. He said his mom wouldn't approve." My heart stopped. Wouldn't approve? My fingers trembled as I typed back, "Approve of what?" No reply. The screen stayed blank, the bubbles never returning. She had vanished, leaving me with those 5 words pounding in my skull. Mom wouldn't approve. Approve of what? The wedding? The secrecy? Or something else entirely? I dropped the phone onto the couch, pressing my hands to my face. My mind raced through every possibility. Had Daniel done something shameful? Something they were hiding? Or had they poisoned him against me, convincing him I was the enemy? The betrayal deepened, sharp and suffocating. It wasn't just that he hadn't invited me. It was that he believed I wouldn't have approved. That I was the obstacle, the problem, the one to be cut out. I thought of the years I had fought for him. Arguing with teachers who doubted him, battling landlords when money was short, sacrificing friendships and even my health to make sure he never went without. I had always approved of him, always supported him, even when I didn't agree. And now, he had rewritten me as the villain in his story. The digital clock blinked 3 a.m. I sat in the glow of the phone screen, hollow, my chest aching with questions that had no answers. Outside, the street was empty, the world asleep, but inside me, everything screamed awake. What wouldn't I have approved of? Was it the rushed wedding, the contract I had glimpsed in his briefcase, the mysterious woman who hovered too close in the photos? Or was there something darker, something I hadn't uncovered yet? I stared at the silent phone, at the unanswered message. The truth was out there, hidden behind whispers and shadows, and I would find it, because if my son thought I wouldn't approve, he was right. But not for the reasons he imagined. The sky that morning was the color of steel, a flat gray that pressed low against the horizon. The air smelled faintly of rain, though none had fallen yet, and I remember thinking how fitting it was, a storm waiting to break. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I pulled up to the pristine white house I had seen online, the house bought with another man's money. The shutters gleamed. The lawn was immaculate, already trimmed by gardeners. Everything about it screamed new, shiny, perfect, and foreign. This wasn't a house Daniel could have afforded on his own. It wasn't the kind of house he grew up in, filled with patched furniture and hand-me-down curtains. This house didn't hold echoes of my sacrifices. It was theirs. I parked by the curb, my chest a furnace of betrayal and grief. I had rehearsed my words on the drive, but the moment I stepped out, all I felt was the weight of years. Years of raising him, of giving him everything I had. My knees almost buckled, but I forced myself forward, each step heavy on the stone walkway. I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing. Then the door opened, and there he was. My son. My Daniel. He looked older than the boy I had carried, the young man I had sent to college. His hair was styled sharp, his shirt pressed, the faintest cologne drifting toward me. Behind him, the house smelled of new paint and lavender. Lila's touch, not mine. "Mom," he said, voice stiff. "No warmth, no smile." "Daniel," I whispered, my throat raw. "We need to talk." He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was spotless, staged almost like a magazine spread. Lila appeared from the kitchen, her expression polite but unreadable. She carried a glass of water and set it on the counter, her hands smooth, movements practiced. She didn't greet me, just stood there watching. I turned to my son, my voice trembling. "Why? Why did you do it without me?" "Without us?" He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at her before answering. "It just made sense at the time." "Made sense?" My voice cracked, rising. "You erased me from your wedding. You had your life's most important day and pretended I didn't exist." His jaw tightened. "It's not about you, Mom." The words hit harder than a slap. I staggered, staring at him. Not about me? I had lived my entire life for him. Every paycheck stretched, every tear swallowed, every sacrifice made. How could he say that? "It's exactly about me," I spat, hands trembling. "Do you think I don't see it? You've been replaced. She and her family bought their way into your life, and you let them. You chose them over me." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Lila shifted but said nothing, her eyes flickering briefly toward the corner of the room. I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it. On a neatly folded armchair, a stack of tiny baby clothes. Soft pastels, blues and yellows, a teddy bear embroidered on the front. My breath caught. Her reply was polite at first, hesitant. "Oh, hello." It was beautiful, very intimate. Everyone seemed so happy. I swallowed the bitterness and asked, "Why didn't anyone from our family know? Why weren't we invited?" The typing bubble lingered longer this time. Finally, her words appeared. I don't know what to say. "Daniel just told us. He said his mom wouldn't approve." My heart stopped. "Wouldn't approve?" My fingers trembled as I typed back, "Approve of what?" No reply. The screen stayed blank, the bubbles never returning. She had vanished, leaving me with those 5 words pounding in my skull. Mom wouldn't approve. Approve of what? The wedding? The secrecy? Or something else entirely? I dropped the phone onto the couch, pressing my hands to my face. My mind raced through every possibility. Had Daniel done something shameful, something they were hiding? Or had they poisoned him against me, convincing him I was the enemy? The betrayal deepened, sharp and suffocating. It wasn't just that he hadn't invited me. It was that he believed I wouldn't have approved, that I was the obstacle, the problem, the one to be cut out. I thought of the years I had fought for him, arguing with teachers who doubted him, battling landlords when money was short, sacrificing friendships and even my health to make sure he never went without. I had always approved of him, always supported him, even when I didn't agree. And now he had rewritten me as the villain in his story. The digital clock blinked 3 a.m. I sat in the glow of the phone screen, hollow, my chest aching with questions that had no answers. Outside, the street was empty, the world asleep. But inside me, everything screamed awake. What wouldn't I have approved of? Was it the rushed wedding? The contract I had glimpsed in his briefcase? The mysterious woman who hovered too close in the photos? Or was there something darker, something I hadn't uncovered yet? I stared at the silent phone, at the unanswered message. The truth was out there, hidden behind whispers and shadows, and I would find it. Because if my son thought I wouldn't approve, he was right, but not for the reasons he imagined. The sky that morning was the color of steel, a flat gray that pressed low against the horizon. The air smelled faintly of rain, though none had fallen yet, and I remember thinking how fitting it was. A storm waiting to break. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I pulled up to the pristine white house I had seen online, the house bought with another man's money. The shutters gleamed. The lawn was immaculate, already trimmed by gardeners. Everything about it screamed new, shiny, perfect, and foreign. This wasn't a house Daniel could have afforded on his own. It wasn't the kind of house he grew up in, filled with patched furniture and hand-me-down curtains. This house didn't hold echoes of my sacrifices. It was theirs. I parked by the curb, my chest a furnace of betrayal and grief. I had rehearsed my words on the drive, but the moment I stepped out, all I felt was the weight of years. Years of raising him, of giving him everything I had. My knees almost buckled, but I forced myself forward, each step heavy on the stone walkway. I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing. Then the door opened, and there he was. My son. My Daniel. He looked older than the boy I had carried, the young man I had sent to college. His hair was styled sharp, his shirt pressed, the faintest cologne drifting toward me. Behind him, the house smelled of new paint and lavender, Lila's touch, not mine. "Mom," he said, voice stiff. No warmth, no smile. "Daniel," I whispered, my throat raw. "We need to talk." He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was spotless, staged almost, like a magazine spread. Lila appeared from the kitchen, her expression polite but unreadable. She carried a glass of water and set it on the counter, her hands smooth, movements practiced. She didn't greet me, just stood there, watching. I turned to my son, my voice trembling. "Why? Why did you do it without me?" "Without us?" He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at her before answering. "It just made sense at the time." "Made sense?" My voice cracked, rising. "You erased me from your wedding. You had your life's most important day and pretended I didn't exist." His jaw tightened. "It's not about you, Mom." The words hit harder than a slap. I staggered, staring at him. Not about me? I had lived my entire life for him, every paycheck stretched, every tear swallowed, every sacrifice made. How could he say that? "It's exactly about me," I spat, hands trembling. "Do you think I don't see it? You've been replaced. She and her family bought their way into your life, and you let them. You chose them over me." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Lila shifted but said nothing, her eyes flickering briefly toward the corner of the room. I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it, on a neatly folded armchair, a stack of tiny baby clothes. Soft pastels, blues and yellows, a teddy bear embroidered on the front. My breath caught. I turned sharply to Daniel. "What is this?" He froze, his lips parting, but no words came. My pulse thundered. Is she... I swallowed hard, pointing at the folded onesies. "Is she pregnant?" Lila's face remained blank, her silence deafening. Daniel looked down, avoiding my eyes, and that avoidance was answer enough. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the sofa to steady myself, memories flashing like lightning. The nights I stayed awake with Daniel as a baby, rocking him until dawn. The times I went to work exhausted, carrying him in my arms because I couldn't afford childcare. I had lived through that sacrifice, carried that burden with love. And now he would do it again, for her. But without me. I laughed bitterly, though it cracked into something closer to a sob. "So that's why. That's why the rushed wedding. That's why the secrecy. You didn't want me to see the truth." Daniel finally looked at me, his eyes tired. "Mom, it wasn't like that. Don't lie to me." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "You thought I wouldn't approve. That's what you told people. But you didn't give me the chance to stand by you. You just decided I was the enemy." His lips pressed tight. He didn't deny it. I turned to Lila. She met my gaze with cold steadiness, her hand slipping protectively across her stomach. The storm inside me broke. I wasn't just shut out, I was replaced. Not only as his family, but now as a grandmother too. A new child, a new bond, and once again I was erased from the picture. I stepped back, my chest burning. "You didn't just cut me out of your wedding. You cut me out of your future." Daniel took a step forward. "Mom, please." But I lifted my hand, silencing him. I couldn't hear his excuses, not now. Not when the betrayal weighed this heavy. I walked to the door, my legs trembling but unyielding. Before I left, I turned once more, my eyes falling on the folded baby clothes. A storm had been waiting outside all morning. As I stepped out, the first raindrops began to fall, cold against my cheeks, or maybe they were tears. The door closed behind me, shutting me out completely. And in my mind, only one question echoed: is she pregnant? And is that the real reason my son hid his entire life from me? The days after the confrontation blurred into one long ache. Rain hammered against the windows, and I couldn't tell if the sound came from outside or inside me. Every thought circled back to the folded baby clothes, to Lila's cold hand drifting across her stomach, to the silent confirmation that I was no longer a mother. I was an outsider, but grief has a way of sharpening into suspicion. And the more I thought about it, the more the pieces refused to fit. The house, the rushed wedding, the secrecy, the way Daniel had avoided my eyes when I asked about the pregnancy. It wasn't just about love. One night, unable to sleep, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I typed Langmore family into the search bar. The results hit like a wave. Articles, business profiles, photos of Lila's father shaking hands with senators, ribbon cuttings for glass towers, magazine covers calling him the Titan of real estate. His empire stretched across cities, hotels, shopping complexes, luxury developments that seemed to grow overnight. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. And suddenly the wedding made sense. The Langmores didn't gain a son-in-law. They absorbed one. I scrolled through page after page, my stomach tightening with each headline. They didn't just want Daniel to marry Lila. They wanted to own him. A week later, the chance to prove it came unexpectedly. Daniel stopped by briefly one afternoon. He didn't stay long. Barely 5 minutes, just enough to pick up some of his old belongings he'd left in the garage. He was distracted, his phone buzzing constantly in his hand. When he left, I noticed he'd forgotten something. A black leather briefcase resting by the couch. I stood frozen, staring at it. My heart pounded. I shouldn't open it. I knew that. But the word shouldn't had lost all meaning ever since he whispered, "It's not about you." With trembling fingers, I clicked it open. Inside were files, neat and precise. Contracts, business proposals, documents stamped with the Langmore crest. And then I saw it, a thick, cream-colored folder. Prenuptial agreement. My hands shook as I pulled it out, unfolding the pages. Legal language swam before my eyes, cold and precise. But one line, highlighted in bold, burned into me. The undersigned Daniel Whitaker agrees to enter binding partnership with the Langmore estate holdings upon legal marriage to Lila Langmore. Partnership, not just marriage. I read further, my pulse racing. Every word dripped with control. He wasn't just marrying her. He was binding himself to her father's empire. His independence, his choices, his loyalties. And then I saw it. A clause buried deep in the text, one that made my throat close. The undersigned agrees that no financial support, assets, or estate distributions shall extend to external family not under the Langmore union. External family. I reread it 3 times, each word slicing deeper. That wasn't legal jargon. That was me. That was us. I dropped the papers onto the table, my breath ragged. My son had signed away his ability to help me, to support me, to acknowledge me. All those years, the nights I went without meals, the bills I paid late, the jobs I worked until my hands ached, all in the hope that one day he'd rise, and maybe, just maybe, remember who helped him climb. And now, a line in a contract had cut me out completely. Tears blurred the ink as I whispered into the empty kitchen. You didn't just marry her. You sold yourself. You sold me. The front door clicked. Panic shot through me. Daniel stepped in, his phone still pressed to his ear. When he saw the briefcase open, his face drained. "Mom," he said sharply, ending the call. "What are you doing?" I stood holding up the papers with trembling hands. "What is this?" His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. "Answer me." My voice broke, louder than I intended. "You signed a contract? You bound yourself to her father's company? To his money?" He reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. My hands shook, but my rage kept them steady enough. Mom, you don't understand. No, I cut him off, my chest burning. I understand perfectly. You didn't just marry Lila, you signed away your loyalty. You signed away your family. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It was the only way. The only way for what? I demanded. For him to buy you a house? For him to buy your future? What about the years I bought you meals, Daniel? What about the rent I paid when you were broke? Did you need a contract to accept that? His face twisted, torn between guilt and frustration. I had no choice. He made it clear, if I wanted to be with Lila, this was part of it. I stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. And you agreed? His silence was the answer. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. The boy I raised, the boy I fought for, had signed away his mother for the promise of wealth. Finally, I whispered the words that had been burning in my chest. You betrayed me. He flinched, but didn't deny it. I sat back down, the papers crumpling in my fist. I could barely see through the tears, but I forced myself to read that line again. No financial support shall extend to external family. External. Not blood, not kin, just external. That was the word they had reduced me to. I thought of the nights I'd stood in line at food banks, clutching his small hand, promising him things would get better. I thought of pawning my wedding ring to pay for his textbooks. I thought of every dream I had deferred just to make sure he had one. And now, in one signature, he had cut me off. Not just from money, but from recognition, from belonging. I looked up at him, my voice shaking. Do you know what this means? It means you can't help me. Not if I lose the house. Not if I get sick. Not even if I'm starving. You've legally promised to let me drown. He looked away, his shoulders slumping. It's complicated, Mom. No, I said firmly, standing tall. It's simple. You chose them. You chose money. You chose a contract over the woman who gave you life. The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, I shoved the papers back into his chest. Take your contract, but remember this. No amount of money will erase the truth. You didn't just lose me as your mother tonight. You lost yourself. He stood frozen, papers in hand, unable to meet my eyes. I turned away, my vision blurring. The air in the house was suffocating, thick with betrayal. I walked out, my footsteps echoing on their polished floors, floors I would never belong to. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. I gulped it down, my tears hot against my cheeks. But one thought cut through everything else, clear and merciless. If a contract could erase me from his life, what else had they made him sign away? The night was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock that seemed louder with every passing second. I sat hunched at the kitchen table, laptop open, the glow bathing my face in cold blue light. My eyes burned, but I couldn't look away. The photographs. I had gone through them dozens of times already, each scroll a fresh stab. Daniel laughing under fairy lights. Lila's father raising a glass, proud as if he had won a prize. My son, smiling as though he belonged to them. But tonight, my gaze sharpened on someone else. A woman. She was there in the background of one picture, standing too close to Daniel at the champagne table. In another, she leaned toward him, their heads inches apart, her lips curved in a secret smile. And in one photo, the worst of all, her hand lingered on his shoulder, his eyes locked with hers while Lila was nowhere in sight. It couldn't be coincidence. I zoomed in, tracing her features. Sharp cheekbones, dark, expressive eyes, a dress that wasn't bridal party satin, but something sleek, professional. She didn't look like a relative. She looked like someone who didn't belong. And yet, there she was. Over and over, my stomach churned. Who was she? Why was she always near my son? I thought back to my confrontation in their house. The baby clothes, the silence, the contract. Betrayal stacked on betrayal until it felt like I was suffocating. And now this woman, another shadow between us. I couldn't let it go. The next morning, fueled by equal parts coffee and rage, I began searching. I clicked through every tagged guest, following links, digging through albums. Finally, buried in a group photo, I found her name, Samantha Gray. Her profile was carefully curated. Corporate headshots, Conference panels. Mentions of the Langmore family company. My pulse quickened as the truth fell into place. She wasn't just some guest. She worked for them. She worked for Lila's father. The bile rose in my throat. My son hadn't just married into a family empire. He was already tangled with one of its employees. I needed to know more. Her LinkedIn listed her as a strategic liaison for Langmore Estates. I almost laughed at the title, strategic liaison. It sounded like code for something dirtier. I debated messaging her, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed a simple line. You looked beautiful at the wedding. I couldn't help but notice how close you were to my son. I expected silence. Instead, minutes later, the typing bubble appeared. Her reply was short, almost careless. Oh, you must be his mom. We've known each other for a while. My hands trembled. Known each other for a while, I typed back, desperate. What do you mean? In what way? There was a pause. Then her message appeared. He promised me it wouldn't last. The words blurred before my eyes. My chest hollowed out. I reread them again and again, hoping I had misunderstood. He promised me it wouldn't last. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. The room tilted, my breath catching in my throat. My son who had already erased me from his life, who had bound himself to another family with a contract, who now had a child on the way, was already betraying his new wife, or worse, betraying me all over again. Memories clawed at me. The times I sat in our old kitchen, waiting for Daniel to come home from high school, worried sick because he was late. The talks I gave him about respect, about honesty, about loyalty. The nights I told him, don't ever be the kind of man who destroys the people who love him. And now? That's exactly who he was. I thought of Lila, cold and poised, clutching her glass of water while I confronted them. Did she know? Did she sense it? Or was she just another pawn in this empire her father had built? A sickening realization crawled over me. Maybe this wasn't about love at all. Maybe the marriage was business, a contract, a merger. And maybe Samantha, this woman with the sharp eyes and confident smile, was where his real loyalty lay. I paced the kitchen, my fists clenching, my heart slamming against my ribs. The betrayal cut in too many directions to count. If Daniel loved Samantha, why marry Lila? If he loved Lila, why whisper promises to Samantha? And through it all, where did I stand? Nowhere, erased, replaced. I thought of the sacrifices. The winter I wore the same threadbare coat so he could have new cleats for soccer, the months I ate rice and beans just to cover his textbooks. Every sacrifice was supposed to mean something. Every choice I made was for him, and in return, he gave me silence, lies, a contract, and now, maybe, a mistress. I couldn't sit still. I reopened the laptop, clicking Samantha's profile again. I scrolled further back, to months before the wedding. There they were, subtle but there. A comment on one of his photos, a blurred reflection of Daniel in the background of hers. Always faint, always hidden, but undeniable once you knew where to look. My stomach dropped. This wasn't new. This wasn't accidental. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He hadn't just betrayed his wife. He had been betraying us all along. The night stretched long, and I sat in the dark, the weight of it crushing me. I whispered to myself, "Who are you, Daniel? What have you become?" The only answer was silence. But one thing was certain. Samantha's words weren't just a slip. They were a warning. He promised me it wouldn't last. The marriage? His loyalty to the Langmores? His ties to me? I didn't know yet. But for the first time, I realized the betrayal wasn't finished. It was still unfolding, and I had just uncovered the sharpest edge of it. The house was cloaked in silence, the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound like a drum. Rain tapped against the window pane, slow and steady, like a clock counting down. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open before me, the glow washing over the stack of evidence I had gathered, printed screenshots of social media posts, the wedding photographs, the prenuptial contract I had copied before handing it back, even the message Samantha had sent me. Each piece felt like a shard of glass, sharp, painful, but together forming a weapon. I had spent weeks drowning in grief. humiliated by whispers, erased from my son's life as though I had never mattered. But pain, I realized, can only hollow you out for so long. Eventually, it hardens into something else, something sharper, resolve. That night, I decided I would not be erased quietly. If they had taken away my seat at the table, I would build my own stage and drag their secrets into the light. It started with the photos. I uploaded one to a private forum first, testing the waters. The image was simple: Daniel and Lila standing under the Langmore estate chandeliers, smiling as though they had written a fairy tale. But I added my caption in bold letters. Guess who wasn't invited? His own mother. The post spread faster than I expected. Screenshots, shares, comments flooding in. Some were sympathetic, others cruel, but it didn't matter. The truth was out. Fueled by the reaction, I uploaded more. A photo of Lila's parents with Daniel. The caption, "Meet their new son." A shot of Daniel clinking glasses with Samantha, blurred in the background. And who exactly is she? I didn't stop there. I leaked the prenuptial excerpt, not the whole contract, but enough to sting. A single highlighted line, "No support shall extend to external family." The comments erupted. Cold. How can he cut out his own mother? Money buys everything, I guess. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. The whispers began almost immediately. At the grocery store, 2 women hushed their voices as I passed. "Did you see what she posted? Her son, really?" The sentence trailed off, but their eyes said enough. At church, one of the ushers shook his head sympathetically. "I heard about the wedding," he murmured, pressing my hand. "No mother deserves that." Even my husband, who had dismissed me as dramatic, couldn't ignore it. One evening, he lowered his newspaper and said, "You've stirred quite the storm." I met his gaze without apology. Good. Let them feel what I felt. And they did. Daniel and Lila's perfect image began to crumble. Friends stopped congratulating them online. Colleagues whispered behind Daniel's back. Neighbors who once praised their new house now looked at it with suspicion. Revenge didn't erase my pain, but it tasted like justice. One night, scrolling through my posts, I noticed a new message. It wasn't from a stranger, but from an old family friend. "I don't know if I should tell you this, but people at Daniel's office are talking. They say Lila's father is furious about the leaks. He's blaming you." I leaned back, a grim smile curling. So the mask was slipping, the mighty Langmores, embarrassed in their glass castle. But beneath the satisfaction, unease gnawed at me. A man like Lila's father wasn't just rich. He was powerful, and powerful men didn't take humiliation lightly. The call came 2 nights later. It was late, nearly midnight. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rumbled in the distance. I was sitting on the couch, half asleep, when my phone buzzed violently against the coffee table. "Unknown number," I answered. A voice, low and sharp, cut through the line. "You think this is a game?" I froze. My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" "You know who I am," the man replied. His tone was controlled, but beneath it was fire. "I am Richard Langmore, and you've made a very big mistake." My heart slammed in my chest. Lila's father. He didn't wait for me to respond. "Take down the posts, every single one. If you don't, I promise you, you'll regret it." For a moment, fear wrapped tight around my throat. But then, like a flicker of lightning, anger surged. "Regret?" I spat. "I already regret everything. I regret sacrificing my life for a son who erased me. I regret ever trusting your family, but I will not regret telling the truth." His silence was chilling. Then he said, "If you come after my family again, I'll bury you so deep no one will remember your name." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, the words echoing in my skull. For a long moment I couldn't move. The storm outside had grown louder, thunder rattling the windows, as though the night itself echoed his threat. But beneath the fear, something steadier began to rise. He thought he could silence me. He thought power meant control. He didn't realize I had already lost everything, and a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of enemy. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, but my mind burning, because if Richard Langmore thought this war was over, he was wrong. It had only just begun. The invitation came not on paper, but through a phone call that rattled me to my core. It was late afternoon, the sun sinking low, casting long amber stripes through the blinds. My phone buzzed across the kitchen counter, and when I answered, I heard the clipped, icy voice of Richard Langmore. Dinner. Tonight. 7 o'clock. Our home. Not a request. A command. The line went dead before I could reply. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, the weight of his authority settling over me like a noose. I should have refused. I should have thrown the phone into the sink and washed my hands of all of them. But I didn't, because some part of me still needed to look my son in the eyes, to hear from his own mouth why I had been erased. Their estate loomed like a fortress, lit by amber lamps along the driveway. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked up the steps, each sound echoing louder than the last. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and expensive wine. The dining room was staged like a painting, a long mahogany table gleaming beneath a crystal chandelier, silverware aligned with military precision. At the head sat Richard Langmore, stern and immovable. Beside him, his wife, composed like a porcelain doll. Lila sat across the table, her hand clasped in Daniel's. And Daniel, my son, wouldn't look at me. "Sit," Richard said, gesturing toward the empty chair at the far end. I sat. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Richard broke it with his booming voice. "Do you know what you've done?" I clenched my hands in my lap. Told the truth, his eyes narrowed. "You've humiliated this family, dragged us into gossip and whispers. You think your bitterness gives you that right?" Anger flared hot in my chest. "Bitterness? I am his mother. And you erased me. You cut me out like I was nothing." Richard leaned forward, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "We protected him." "From you?" The words landed like a slap. "Protected? From me?" I turned to Daniel, searching his face for denial, for anything. But he stayed silent, his head bowed slightly, as though the chandelier light was too bright. My throat tightened. "Protected him from what, Richard? From the mother who worked 3 jobs to put him through school? From the woman who sold her wedding ring to pay his rent? From the only person who stood by him when no one else would?" Richard's lips curled into a cold smile. "From your control, from your suffocating grip, from your inability to let him become his own man." My breath caught, humiliation burning my cheeks. I remembered the nights I skipped meals so he wouldn't go hungry, the winters I wrapped myself in thin coats so he could have new ones. Was that suffocation? Was that control? I turned back to Daniel, desperation clawing at me. "Say something. Tell me this isn't what you believe." His jaw worked, but no words came. Only silence. That silence cut deeper than any insult Richard could hurl. The dinner began, though no one ate. Plates of roasted lamb and potatoes steamed in front of us, untouched, the scent heavy and nauseating. Lila finally spoke, her voice calm but sharp. "You've made this harder for everyone. We wanted peace, and you chose war. Peace?" I snapped, my voice trembling. "You stole my son's wedding from me. You locked me out of his life. Don't speak to me of peace." Her mother, seated primly beside Richard, added quietly, "We only did what was necessary. Family must be chosen carefully." The irony nearly choked me. Family must be chosen carefully. As though blood meant nothing. As though I had been weighed and discarded. I reached into my bag, my resolve hardening. My hand closed around the folder I had carried with me. The evidence. "I came prepared tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I pulled out the wedding photographs, spreading them across the table. Daniel with Lila's parents laughing. Daniel with Samantha in the background, their eyes locked. Each photo a dagger. Richard's expression didn't falter. But I saw the flicker in Lila's eyes when Samantha's face appeared. "And this," I continued, pulling out the prenuptial contract, flipping to the highlighted clause. I shoved it toward Richard, then toward Daniel. "No financial support shall extend to external family," I read aloud, my voice sharp. "That's me. That's his father. That's everyone who ever sacrificed for him. You bought him, Richard. You bought my son and cut me out of his life with ink on a page." The silence that followed was thunderous. I looked directly at Daniel. "Deny it. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't sign away your loyalty. Tell me you didn't sell your own mother for a house and a last name." But he stayed silent. Again. The humiliation burned hotter than fire. I slammed the folder onto the polished wood, the sound cracking through the room. The chandelier rattled slightly overhead. My hands trembled, but my eyes locked on theirs. "Go ahead," I hissed. "Deny the truth. I dare you." The night smelled of roses and expensive champagne. Even from the sidewalk, I could hear the muffled strains of a string quartet drifting from the grand ballroom of the Langmore Hotel. Light poured from its windows in golden streams, spilling onto the street like an invitation to anyone with the right name, the right money, the right blood. I wasn't on that list. But I walked in anyway. The doorman hesitated when I approached, his eyes flicking over my plain black dress. Not glamorous, not sequined, not designer. Just a dress of quiet dignity. "Ma'am, this is a private event." "I'm family," I said simply, my voice iron. I didn't wait for permission. I slipped past him, my heels clicking sharply against marble. Inside, the ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers dripped with light. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, diamonds sparkled on manicured hands. At the center of it all stood Daniel and Lila, their smiles wide and rehearsed, as if nothing in the world could touch them. My chest tightened. He looked like a man I didn't know. I gripped the small flash drive in my purse, its weight heavier than stone. Weeks of gathering evidence, Samantha's messages, screenshots, the contract, all packed into this tiny device. Tonight, I would use it. I moved along the edge of the room, the way shadows do, until I reached the table where the audiovisual crew managed the large projector. No one questioned me. I carried myself like I belonged, and in a way I did, more than anyone here. The speeches began. Lila's father, Richard, rose with his glass, his voice booming. "To family, to unity, to the future we've built together," applause thundered. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with rage. When the applause died down, I stepped forward. My voice cut through the chatter. "Yes, let's talk about family." Heads turned. Conversation stilled. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Daniel's eyes widened when he saw me. "Mom," he began, but his voice faltered. I walked to the projector table and, with a calmness that belied the storm inside me, handed the technician my flash drive. "Play this." He hesitated. "Ma'am, Do it," I said, my tone cold, commanding. He obeyed. The lights dimmed, and the projector flickered to life. The first image filled the screen. Daniel and Lila at their wedding, glowing, perfect. A murmur of admiration swept through the guests. Then the next slide appeared, a photo of Daniel, laughing, with Samantha's hand resting on his shoulder. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Another slide, the message I had saved, enlarged for all to see. "He promised me it wouldn't last." The room exploded. Whispers turned to sharp intakes of breath, to scattered voices. "What does this mean?" "Who is she?" "Is that true?" I stood tall, my voice slicing through the chaos. "That is Samantha Gray, an employee of the Langmore Company, and the woman my son promised more to than his new wife." Lila's glass shattered on the floor. Her face crumpled, tears spilling. Daniel surged forward. "Stop this! Turn it off!" But I wasn't finished. I raised my hand, and the next slide appeared, the prenuptial contract. The clause highlighted in bold. "No financial support shall extend to external family." I spoke each word slowly, deliberately. This is what they made him sign. A contract erasing his family, his mother, his father, everyone who sacrificed for him. Bought and owned by Richard Langmore. The room was electric with shock. Some guests covered their mouths. Others whispered viciously. Richard's face turned crimson, fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "You dare," he growled. I met his glare head on. "I dare, because you may have money, Richard. But I have the truth." For a moment, time stopped. I saw everything at once, Lila trembling, her perfect facade shattered. Richard's wife, pale and stiff beside him. Daniel, frozen, his face drained of color, and the whispers. Oh, the whispers. They surged like a wave, rolling across the ballroom, spilling from table to table. She wasn't invited to the wedding? He signed away his own mother? And another woman? Public humiliation. Exactly what they had wanted for me. Now it was theirs. Daniel finally spoke, his voice raw. "Mom, what have you done?" I turned to him, tears burning in my eyes, but my chin held high. "What you should have done." I told the truth. His hands shook at his sides. "You've destroyed everything." I stepped closer, my voice low but cutting. "No, Daniel, I didn't destroy it. You did. When you chose them over me, when you signed away your loyalty, when you forgot who stood by you when no one else did." His face crumpled, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. Behind him, Lila sobbed openly, her mascara streaking, her hands shaking as she backed away from him. Richard stood, fists clenched on the table, his fury palpable. The whispers grew louder, sharper, relentless. I looked around the room, at all the faces watching, judging, condemning. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. The projector clicked off. The lights came back up. Silence reigned for one long, unbearable moment. Daniel turned to me, his face pale, his lips barely moving. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of it. And I knew in that instant, nothing would ever be the same again. The winter air had turned sharp by the time everything collapsed. I remember the first snow of the season drifting across the street, the flakes soft and silent, settling on rooftops like secrets. My breath fogged the window pane as I stood in the living room, clutching a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. The house was still. My husband sat in his recliner, pretending to read but really just hiding in the silence. The television hummed faintly in the background. And then, for the first time in weeks, the doorbell rang. It was him. Daniel stood on the porch, his shoulders hunched, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He looked nothing like the shining groom in those photographs. He looked like a boy again, lost, ashamed, broken. I opened the door, the winter wind pushing against us both. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He shifted on his feet, his lips trembling like he was trying to piece together words that had abandoned him. "Mom," he whispered finally. The word cracked something in me, but I didn't let it show. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once helped him with homework, where I'd stretched single meals into two, where I'd held his hand when his father was laid off. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. His fingers traced the rim of the mug I set before him, though he never touched the coffee. "They're gone," he said finally. His voice was flat, broken. "Lila moved back with her parents. Her father cut me off. The company, everything. It's over." I studied him, my chest tight. Once, I would have rushed to comfort him, to remind him he wasn't alone. But the memory of contracts, of erased invitations, of Samantha's message, he promised me it wouldn't last, burned too deeply. "I warned you," I said softly. His head snapped up, eyes desperate. I know you did. And I didn't listen. I thought I could handle it. But I lost everything." "No," I corrected. "You didn't lose everything. You gave it away," he flinched. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ticking clock on the wall. A flash of memory seared through me. Daniel at 16, storming out of the house after we fought about curfew. Hours later, I had found him asleep on the bus stop bench, shivering. I wrapped my coat around him and whispered, "You can always come home." Back then, forgiveness had come easily. Now it felt like a stranger. He leaned forward suddenly, his voice breaking. "I need you, Mom, please. I don't know where else to go." The boy in him was begging. The man in him was ashamed. And I, caught between love and betrayal, felt the weight of a choice heavier than any I had made before. I thought of the years of sacrifice, the bruised knuckles from double shifts, the hollow stomach when I skipped meals, the pawned jewelry, the sleepless nights. All for him, always for him. And then I thought of the wedding I wasn't invited to, the contract that called me external family, the photographs where I had been erased. He had chosen them once. And he would again if I let him. I drew a breath, steadying the storm in my chest. "You left me once," I said, my voice firm, steady, unshaking. "I won't let you do it again." His face crumpled, the tears finally breaking. "Please, I don't have anyone else." I stood, placing my hand on the back of his chair. Not tender, not cruel, just final. And whose fault is that? The snow outside thickened, muting the world into silence. He sat there, a man undone, while I walked to the window, watching the flakes drift down like the pieces of everything we had lost. For the first time in months, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel erased. I felt strong, because forgiveness, I realized, wasn't owed. It was mine to give or withhold, and tonight I chose myself. I turned back to him, my voice quiet but resolute. Go find out who you are without them, without me. Until then, don't come back. His sob cracked through the room. But I didn't falter. I had carried him all his life. Tonight, I laid that weight down. When the door finally shut behind him, the silence that followed wasn't hollow anymore. It was peace. I walked back to the table, my hands no longer trembling, and whispered to myself the truth I had waited so long to claim. Her name was always mine. And so, I chose dignity over chaos, strength over betrayal. But tell me, if it were you, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven or turned him away? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.